A millionaire sits in his high-rise office, alone and in control. A quiet little girl enters, holding a strange drawing. She points to the bookshelf and whispers, "There's a camera watching you." From that moment, everything he thought he knew begins to fall apart. Welcome to Tales by Orion. Let's uncover what really happened. The polished chrome and smoked glass of Julian Vance's penthouse office reflected a cityscape that sprawled beneath him like a conquered territory. From this vantage point, 50 stories above the relentless thrum of urban life, Julian commanded an empire built on shrewd investments and an almost preternatural ability to anticipate market shifts. His days were a meticulously orchestrated symphony of high-stakes meetings, data streams, and decisions that could make or break fortunes. Yet, amidst this world of calculated risks and immense wealth, a softer, more personal melody was beginning to play. Isabella Rossi, his fiancée, was the composer of that tune. She had entered his life 6 months prior, a vision of sophisticated grace and effortless charm, her laughter like wind chimes, her intelligence a stimulating counterpoint to his own. She understood his world, or so it seemed, offering insightful commentary on his business dealings and a soothing presence that eased the sharp edges of his demanding life. Their wedding was planned for the spring, a lavish affair that would undoubtedly be the society event of the season. Julian, a man who had long prioritized ambition over affection, found himself undeniably, almost bewilderingly, happy. He trusted Isabella implicitly, saw in her a partner, a confidant, the woman who would finally make his vast, empty penthouse feel like a home. Unseen, unheard by the titans of industry and the purveyors of luxury who populated Julian's world, was another, much smaller presence in his life, Lily Carter. At 7 years old, Lily was a creature of quiet observation, her large, dark eyes missing little from her vantage point near her mother, Maria. Maria Carter had been Julian's housekeeper for over a decade, a woman of unwavering loyalty and discreet efficiency, her presence a quiet constant in his otherwise fluctuating world. Lily often accompanied her mother to the penthouse on Saturdays or on weekday afternoons when school was out, while Maria moved silently through the opulent rooms, restoring order with practiced hands. Lily would find a quiet corner, perhaps in the vast, sun-drenched atrium or curled in an oversized armchair in the library, her small hands busy with a sketchbook and a fistful of colored pencils. She rarely spoke unless spoken to, her world an internal landscape of vibrant imagination and keen, silent observation. Julian, when he noticed her at all, saw a well-behaved, somewhat shy child, a peripheral figure in the backdrop of his busy life. He was always polite, offering a brief smile or a distracted greeting, but he never truly saw her, not in the way Lily saw him, her gaze often lingering on his tired eyes, or the way his smile didn't quite reach them when Isabella wasn't looking. One late Saturday afternoon, Julian was in his home office, a sanctuary of gleaming mahogany and cutting-edge technology, trying to unwind from a particularly brutal week. Isabella was out, attending a charity luncheon, her laughter and light scent still lingering faintly in the air. Maria was in the kitchen, the rhythmic clatter of her work a soothing, familiar sound. Lily, who had been sketching the cityscape from the atrium, padded silently into the office, her small hand clutching a drawing. Julian, engrossed in a complex financial report on his monitor, barely registered her approach. "Mr. Vance?" Lily's voice was a small, hesitant whisper, barely audible above the hum of his computer. He looked up, a flicker of impatience quickly masked by a polite smile. "Yes, Lily? What is it?" She held out her drawing. It was a child's rendition of his office, the lines wobbly, the perspective skewed, but surprisingly detailed. His desk, his chair, the sprawling view from the window. And then, in the corner, near the towering bookshelf, a small, crudely drawn box with a single, unblinking red eye. "What's this, Lily?" Julian asked, pointing to the strange box. Lily looked down at her shoes, her voice dropping even lower, to a conspiratorial murmur that sent an unexpected, almost imperceptible shiver down his spine. "There's a camera in your office, Mr. Vance," she whispered, her dark eyes flicking nervously towards the bookshelf, then back to his face, her expression one of childlike gravity. "A secret eye. It watches you." Julian stared at her, the polite smile freezing on his face. A camera? In his office? The idea was preposterous. His security was state-of-the-art, his office a fortress. This was his private domain. He felt a surge of irritation, quickly followed by a more rational thought. She was a child, an imaginative child. "A camera, Lily," he said, his voice gentle, a touch patronizing. "Are you sure? Maybe it was just a reflection or a new piece of equipment you haven't seen before." Lily shook her head, her small face set with a seriousness that was surprisingly compelling. "No, Mr. Vance. It's hidden. In the books. It has a little red light. It watches you when you work. It watches you when Isabella is here too." The mention of Isabella, coupled with the specific detail of the red light, sent another, sharper shiver through him. He looked at the bookshelf, then back at Lily's earnest, worried face. It was absurd, utterly absurd, and yet, the child's conviction, her quiet, unwavering insistence, was strangely unsettling. He forced a reassuring smile. "Well, Lily, that's a very interesting observation. Thank you for telling me. I'll certainly keep an eye out for any secret cameras." He patted her head, a dismissive, avuncular gesture. Lily looked up at him, her dark eyes filled with an unspoken plea of frustration at his adult condescension. Then, with a small sigh, she turned and padded silently out of the office, leaving Julian alone with his financial reports, her strange, unsettling drawing, and the faint, lingering echo of her whispered warning. He tried to dismiss it, to return to his work, but the image of the crudely drawn box with its single, unblinking red eye kept superimposing itself over the complex spreadsheets on his screen. A child's fantasy, of course, nothing more. But the seed of doubt, however tiny, however irrational, had been planted. And in the fertile ground of Julian Vance's meticulously ordered world, even the smallest seed of doubt had a tendency to take root and grow in the most unexpected ways. The quiet certainty in Lily's voice, the specificity of her observation, gnawed at the edges of his composure, a dissonant note in the otherwise perfect symphony of his life with Isabella. Julian tried to shake off Lily's unsettling pronouncement, attributing it to the overactive imagination of a 7-year-old. Children saw monsters in shadows, spies in everyday objects. It was natural, yet the image of that small, earnest face, the quiet conviction in her voice, lingered at the edges of his thoughts like a persistent, unwelcome guest. He found himself glancing towards the towering bookshelf in his office more often than usual, his eyes unconsciously scanning the rows of leather-bound volumes, searching for what? A glint of red light? A telltale lens? It was ridiculous. His office was a fortress, swept regularly for electronic surveillance by the best security firm money could buy. The idea that a hidden camera could exist there, unnoticed, was preposterous. When Isabella returned later that evening, her presence, usually a source of comfort and delight, felt subtly different to him. He watched her as she recounted the details of the charity luncheon, her voice animated, her gestures graceful. She was, as always, captivating. But now, a tiny, insidious question mark hovered over her every word, her every action. Was her affection genuine? Or was it a performance, a carefully crafted illusion? He hated himself for these thoughts, for allowing a child's fantasy to poison his perception of the woman he loved, the woman he was going to marry. He resolved to put it out of his mind. The next morning, he mentioned Lily's story to Maria, careful to frame it as an amusing anecdote, a testament to her daughter's vivid imagination. "Lily told me yesterday she thinks there's a secret camera in my office, Maria," he said, forcing a light chuckle. "Can you imagine? She even drew me a picture of it, a little box with a red eye, hidden in the bookshelf." Maria paused in her dusting, a thoughtful frown creasing her brow. "Lily has always been observant, Mr. Vance," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "And she doesn't usually make things up. Not like that. Her response, so different from the dismissive reassurance he had expected, did little to ease the nagging disquiet in his mind. Well, I'm sure it's nothing, Julian said, a little too quickly. Just a child's fancy. But Maria's quiet words, her implicit trust in her daughter's perception, added another layer to his unease. Later that day, during a video conference with his board of directors, Julian found his gaze drifting, once again, to the bookshelf. He scanned the spines of the books, the small gaps between them, the decorative objects placed strategically on the shelves. Nothing. Of course, there was nothing. He was being foolish, allowing a child's whisper to distract him from multi-million-dollar decisions. Yet the unease persisted. That evening, Isabella was particularly affectionate. She prepared his favorite meal, her culinary skills yet another facet of her seemingly endless talents. She spoke of their wedding plans, her eyes shining with an excitement that seemed entirely genuine. She massaged the tension from his shoulders, her touch both soothing and subtly seductive. "You seem a little preoccupied tonight, darling," she murmured, her lips brushing against his ear. "Is everything all right at work?" Julian forced a smile. "Just the usual pressures, my love. Nothing for you to worry about." But even as he spoke the words, a small, treacherous voice in the back of his mind whispered, "Is she asking because she genuinely cares? Or because she already knows?" He pushed the thought away, disgusted with his own suspicion. This was Isabella, the woman who had brought light and laughter back into his life. He was letting a child's fantasy, and perhaps his own deeply buried insecurities, tarnish something precious. He resolved, once again, to forget about Lily's camera. It was a distraction, a piece of nonsense. He needed to focus on Isabella, on their future, on the happiness she so effortlessly brought him. Yet, later that night, as he lay in bed beside her, her breathing soft, and, even in the darkness, Julian found himself staring at the ceiling, his mind replaying Lily's words, her serious little face, the unwavering conviction in her eyes. A secret eye. It watches you. The image of that crudely drawn red eye, unblinking and malevolent, seemed to be imprinted on the inside of his eyelids. He tried to rationalize it. Perhaps Lily had seen a reflection from a piece of equipment, a blinking LED on a router or a server he'd forgotten about. Perhaps she'd had a vivid dream and confused it with reality. There were a dozen logical explanations. And yet, the specificity of her description, hidden in the books, the detail of the red light, the inclusion of Isabella in her observation, it watches you when Isabella is here too. These things nagged at him, refusing to be dismissed. He knew he was being irrational. He knew he was letting a child's imagination get the better of him. But the seed of doubt, once planted, was proving stubbornly difficult to uproot. It was a tiny, insidious weed, its tendrils slowly, almost imperceptibly, beginning to wrap themselves around the foundations of his carefully constructed world. The peace he had found with Isabella suddenly felt fragile, precarious, threatened by the innocent, yet deeply unsettling whisper of a 7-year-old girl. The week that followed Lily's whispered warning was one of subtle, internal dissonance for Julian. Outwardly, life continued as usual. He immersed himself in his work, attended meetings, made decisions that impacted global markets. Isabella remained the epitome of loving attentiveness, her charm undiminished, her affection a constant, reassuring presence. Yet, beneath the surface of his meticulously ordered existence, a current of unease eddied and flowed, fueled by the memory of Lily's small, serious face and her unwavering conviction. He found himself observing Isabella with a new, almost clinical detachment at times, dissecting her words, her gestures, searching for, he wasn't sure what. Any sign of insincerity? Any flicker of deception? He found nothing, of course. She was flawless, her performance, if it was a performance, impeccable. And each time he caught himself in these moments of suspicion, a wave of self-loathing would wash over him. He was becoming paranoid, cynical, allowing a child's fantasy to poison the most precious relationship in his life. He tried to compensate by being more affectionate towards Isabella, more attentive, as if to atone for his silent, unworthy doubts. Yet, even as he held her, as he listened to her laughter, as he looked into her beautiful, adoring eyes, Lily's words would echo in the back of his mind. It watches you when Isabella is here too. The implication, if true, was monstrous, unthinkable. It suggested a level of betrayal so profound, so intimate, that his mind shied away from contemplating it fully. On Wednesday, Maria brought Lily to the penthouse a little earlier than usual. Julian was on a sensitive conference call in his office, the door slightly ajar. He was discussing a highly confidential acquisition, a deal that, if successful, would significantly reshape his company's future. As he spoke, he was vaguely aware of Lily's small figure hovering in the hallway outside, her sketchbook clutched in her hand. She wasn't trying to listen, he knew. She was probably just waiting for her mother. But her presence, so close to the source of his current, irrational unease, made him feel a prickle of discomfort. Later that evening, as he and Isabella were enjoying a quiet dinner, she casually remarked, "That acquisition of the Ethelred Group sounds like a brilliant move, Julian. Very bold. Very—" Julian froze, his wine glass halfway to his lips. The Ethelred acquisition was known only to his most trusted board members and a handful of senior executives. He hadn't mentioned it to Isabella, not yet. He had planned to, of course, but he hadn't gotten around to it. How did you know about Ethelred?" he asked, his voice carefully neutral, though his heart had begun to beat a little faster. Isabella laughed, a light, melodious sound. "Oh, darling, you men and your secrets. I overheard you on a call earlier when I popped in to pick up my wrap. You were so engrossed, I didn't want to disturb you. But it sounded very exciting." She smiled at him, her eyes sparkling with what appeared to be genuine admiration. Her explanation was plausible, entirely plausible. He often left his office door ajar. She could easily have overheard a fragment of his conversation. Yet, Lily's words, Lily's drawing, flashed in his mind. It watches you. It has a little red light. Could Isabella's knowledge have come not from a casually overheard conversation, but from something more deliberate, more insidious? He pushed the thought away. It was too ugly, too monstrous to contemplate. He loved Isabella. He trusted her. He had to. But the seed of doubt, nourished by this new, unsettling coincidence, sent another, deeper root into the fertile ground of his unease. That night, sleep eluded him. He lay beside Isabella, her breathing soft and even her body warm against his. But his mind was a maelstrom. He replayed Lily's words, Isabella's casual comment, the details of the Ethelred deal. He tried to fit the pieces together, to find a logical, innocent explanation. But the pieces wouldn't quite fit. There was always a discordant note, a lingering question mark. He thought of Lily again, her quiet, unwavering conviction, her simple, direct warning. Children, he knew, often saw things that adults, blinded by their own complexities and assumptions, missed. They had a way of cutting through the noise, of seeing the unvarnished truth. Was it possible? Was it truly possible that this child, this quiet, observant little girl, had stumbled upon a secret so dark, so corrosive, that it threatened to destroy everything he held dear? The thought was terrifying. But the alternative, to dismiss her warning, to ignore the growing chorus of his own doubts, to potentially walk blindly into a devastating betrayal, was even more so. He knew, with a dawning, sickening certainty, that he could no longer afford to ignore Lily's whisper. He had to know the truth, whatever the cost. The peace of his meticulously ordered world had been shattered, and the only way to restore it, or to rebuild it from the ashes, was to confront the possibility of the unthinkable. His fortress, he suspected, had been breached not by an external enemy, but by a viper he had welcomed into his own heart. And a 7-year-old girl, with a crayon and a whisper, was the unlikely sentinel who had sounded the alarm. The decision to investigate Lily's claim, truly investigate it, solidified in Julian's mind like ice forming on a winter pond, slowly at first, then with a sudden, chilling finality. The Ethelred incident had been a tipping point, a small, sharp piece of data that refused to align with Isabella's narrative of casual eavesdropping. The unease that had been a simmering undercurrent now threatened to boil over, scalding his carefully constructed illusions. He knew he couldn't simply confront Isabella. If she was indeed deceiving him, she was far too clever, too practiced, to be caught by a direct accusation. He needed proof, irrefutable proof, or he risked destroying their relationship based on what might still, however improbably, be a child's fantasy and his own burgeoning paranoia. He also couldn't involve his regular security team. Not yet. If there was truly a camera planted by someone he trusted implicitly, then involving others prematurely could tip his hand, could allow the deceiver to cover their tracks. No, this required a more delicate, more personal approach. He decided to wait until the following Saturday, a day when Maria and Lily would be at the penthouse, and Isabella, conveniently, had a long-standing engagement. A spa day followed by a charity auction, an all-day affair that would keep her occupied and away from the apartment. It was the perfect window of opportunity. The week leading up to that Saturday was an exercise in exquisite torture for Julian. He had to maintain a facade of normalcy, of loving attentiveness towards Isabella, while his mind raced with suspicion and a growing sense of dread. Every affectionate gesture from her, every shared smile, every intimate moment felt tainted, layered with a potential duplicity that made his stomach churn. He found himself analyzing her words, her expressions, with an almost obsessive intensity, searching for clues, for tells, for any sign that the beautiful, loving woman he thought he knew was, in fact, a carefully constructed illusion. He saw nothing, of course. Isabella was, as always, flawless. Her performance, if it was a performance, was Oscar-worthy. Saturday morning dawned, gray and oppressive, mirroring Julian's mood. Isabella departed early, a vision in silk and pearls, her laughter echoing in the hallway as she kissed him goodbye, a kiss that felt, to Julian, like a cold, Judas touch. Once she was gone, a tense, heavy silence settled over the penthouse. Maria went about her duties with her usual quiet efficiency, her presence a comforting, familiar anchor in Julian's turbulent emotional sea. Lily, sensing the undercurrent of tension, was even quieter than usual, her large, dark eyes following Julian with a worried, knowing expression. Julian waited until mid-morning, until he was certain Isabella was fully engrossed in her spa treatments, before he approached his office. He paused at the door, his heart hammering against his ribs. This was it, the moment of truth. He took a deep breath and entered, closing the door softly behind him. The office, his sanctuary, his command center, suddenly felt alien, potentially hostile. He looked at the towering bookshelf, the rows of leather-bound volumes, the carefully arranged objets d'art. Where would one hide a camera in such a space? Lily's drawing had depicted it in the books, a small box with a red eye. He started there, his hands surprisingly steady as he began to systematically remove books from the shelves, examining the spaces behind them, the undersides of the shelves themselves. He ran his fingers along the spines, searching for any telltale wires, any unnatural protrusions. Nothing. He moved on, his search becoming more meticulous, more desperate. He checked behind paintings, inside decorative vases, beneath his massive mahogany desk. He examined every piece of electronic equipment, every power outlet, every ventilation grill. Still nothing. An hour passed, then two. Frustration began to gnaw at him. Was Lily mistaken? Had he allowed himself to be consumed by paranoia, by a child's overactive imagination? Was he about to destroy his relationship with Isabella, the woman he loved, based on a phantom fear? He was about to give up, to dismiss the entire enterprise as a fool's errand, when his gaze fell upon a particular set of antique encyclopedias, beautifully bound volumes that had been a gift from Isabella early in their relationship. They occupied a prominent position on a lower shelf, their gilt lettering gleaming dully in the filtered light. He had rarely, if ever, opened them. They were more decorative than functional in this age of instant digital information. Something, a flicker of intuition, a memory of Lily's drawing, made him pause. He knelt down, his eyes scanning the spines. One volume, C to D, seemed to be a fraction of an inch out of alignment with the others, almost imperceptibly so. His heart began to pound again, a heavy, suffocating drum. With trembling fingers, he reached for the volume. It felt different, lighter than it should. He pulled it from the shelf, and then he saw it. Carved into the hollowed-out pages of the encyclopedia, nestled within a bed of carefully cut foam, was a small, black metallic box. And on the front of that box, almost invisible against the dark metal, was a tiny pinprick lens. His breath caught in his throat. He turned the box over in his hands, his mind reeling. There, on the underside, was a minuscule switch, and beside it, an even tinier LED light. He flicked the switch. The LED glowed a faint, insidious red. Lily's red eye. The camera. It was real. It was here, in his office, hidden in a gift from the woman he was about to marry. The shock was a physical blow, knocking the air from his lungs, leaving him gasping, his mind struggling to comprehend the enormity of the betrayal. Every loving gesture, every shared confidence, every tender moment with Isabella, now replayed in his mind, overlaid with this new, horrifying reality. It had all been a lie, a carefully constructed, beautifully executed, monstrous lie. He felt a wave of nausea wash over him, a cold, bitter taste in his mouth. He had been a fool, a blind, trusting fool, and a 7-year-old girl, with her innocent eyes and her unwavering conviction, had seen the truth he had been so desperate to ignore. The fortress had indeed been breached, and the enemy was not at the gates. She was already inside, sleeping in his bed, her dagger poised at his unsuspecting heart. The discovery of the camera was a moment of sickening, brutal clarity for Julian. The world, which had seemed so vibrant, so full of promise just moments before, now resolved itself into harsh, unforgiving shades of gray. The warmth he had felt for Isabella, the trust he had so readily given, curdled into a cold, bitter knot of betrayal in the pit of his stomach. He sank into his leather office chair, the small, black box clutched in his trembling hand, its tiny red, "I am malevolent," accusing stare. His mind raced, replaying scenes from the past 6 months, every interaction with Isabella now cast in a new, sinister light. Her seemingly innocent questions about his business, her uncanny ability to anticipate his moods, her seemingly supportive presence at his side during sensitive negotiations. Had it all been a performance, a meticulously crafted charade designed to gain his trust, to lull him into a state of complacent vulnerability while she systematically plundered his secrets? The implications were devastating, reaching far beyond the personal betrayal. If Isabella had access to the confidential information discussed in this office, the potential damage to his company, to his clients, to his reputation, was incalculable. Who was she working for? A rival corporation? A foreign entity? Or was she simply a supremely gifted grifter, playing a long game for his fortune? He felt a surge of cold, hard anger, an emotion he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. Anger at Isabella, for her calculated, monstrous deception. Anger at himself, for his blindness, his naivety, his willingness to believe in a fairy tale. And a profound, overwhelming gratitude towards Lily, that small, quiet child, with her innocent eyes and her unwavering intuition, had been his only true sentinel, the unlikely Cassandra who had tried to warn him of the enemy within his gates. He owed her an apology, a debt of gratitude that could never truly be repaid. But first, he had to deal with Isabella. He couldn't simply confront her, not yet. He needed more than just the camera. He needed to understand the scope of her treachery, the extent of her network, the ultimate goal of her insidious game. To confront her now would be to tip his hand, to allow her to destroy evidence, to slip through his fingers like smoke. No, he would play her game. He would become the actor, the performer. He would maintain the facade of the loving, trusting fiancé, while behind the mask, he would be watching, listening, gathering the evidence he needed to expose her, to dismantle her carefully constructed web of lies. He carefully replaced the hollowed-out encyclopedia on the shelf, ensuring it was perfectly aligned, the tiny lens aimed, as before, at his desk. He reactivated the camera, its small red light a silent, secret accomplice in his unfolding counter-deception. The thought of being watched, of performing for an unseen, hostile audience, was repulsive, a violation of his deepest sense of privacy. But it was a necessary evil, a weapon he would now turn against his enemy. The rest of that Saturday passed in a haze of controlled fury and meticulous planning. He called his head of security, a man he trusted implicitly, a former intelligence operative with a reputation for discretion and ruthless efficiency. He explained the situation, his voice cold and level, betraying none of the emotional turmoil that seethed within him. They arranged for a covert team to sweep his entire penthouse, not just the office, for any other listening devices, any other hidden cameras. They would also begin a discreet, deep-dive investigation into Isabella Rossi, her background, her associates, her financial dealings, her every move. When Isabella returned that evening, flushed from her spa day, laden with purchases from the charity auction, her laughter echoing through the penthouse, Julian greeted her with a kiss, a smile, a carefully crafted illusion of normalcy. "Did you have a good day, my love?" he asked, his voice smooth, betraying nothing of the cold rage that coiled in his gut. "Wonderful, darling," she replied, her eyes sparkling, her hand caressing his cheek. "But I missed you." He looked into those beautiful, deceitful eyes, and for the first time, he saw not the woman he loved, but a stranger, a skilled actress playing a role, a predator who had mistaken him for prey. And he knew, with a chilling certainty, that the game was now truly on. He would let her believe she was still in control, still the puppet master pulling his strings. He would feed her information, stage conversations, lay a trail of carefully crafted crumbs for her to follow. And then, when the time was right, when he had all the evidence he needed, he would spring his trap. The thought of her inevitable downfall, of the moment her mask would finally shatter, was a cold, satisfying comfort, a small, hard kernel of anticipation in the vast, aching emptiness of his betrayed heart. He would be patient. He would be meticulous. He would be as ruthless in his pursuit of justice as she had been in her pursuit of his destruction. The hunter, he realized with a grim satisfaction, was about to become the hunted. And the little girl with the sketchbook and the quiet, observant eyes had, unknowingly, armed him with the one weapon Isabella Rossi could never have anticipated: the truth. The following week was a masterclass in deception, a high-stakes game of cat and mouse played out against the backdrop of opulent penthouses and high-powered boardrooms. Julian, armed with the horrifying knowledge of Isabella's treachery, moved through his days with a newfound, chilling composure. He was an actor on a stage of his own making, his every word, every gesture, carefully calibrated to maintain the illusion of the loving, unsuspecting fiancée, while his mind worked with a cold, relentless precision, gathering evidence, laying the groundwork for Isabella's inevitable downfall. The covert security sweep of his penthouse, conducted while Isabella was conveniently out with friends, revealed a network of sophisticated surveillance devices that went far beyond the single camera in his office. Tiny microphones were found hidden in light fixtures, in picture frames, even in the bespoke headboard of their bed. The sheer scope of her espionage was staggering, a testament to her meticulous planning and her utter lack of conscience. Each new discovery was another nail in the coffin of the love he had once felt for her, another piece of ice forming around his shattered heart. He learned to live with the constant, unsettling awareness of being watched, of being listened to. He used it to his advantage. He staged phone calls in his office, discussing fictitious business deals, hinting at non-existent vulnerabilities, feeding Isabella, and whoever she was working for, a steady stream of carefully crafted misinformation. He would then watch, with a cold, detached fascination, as she subtly tried to probe him for more details, her questions artfully disguised as loving concern, her eyes gleaming with an unholy mixture of avarice and feigned empathy. It was a repulsive, enlightening performance. He saw, with a new, horrifying clarity, the true nature of the woman he had been about to marry. She was a predator, pure and simple, cloaked in beauty and charm, her heart a cold, calculating machine. His head of security, a grim, taciturn man named Thorne, no relation, a fact Julian found grimly ironic, was making progress on the deep-dive investigation into Isabella Rossi. Her real name, it turned out, was Anya Petrova, a woman with a shadowy past, a string of discarded identities, and suspected links to an international ring of corporate spies and high-class grifters. She had a history of targeting wealthy, powerful men, insinuating herself into their lives, gaining their trust, and then, when the time was right, plundering their assets, their secrets, their very souls. Julian was not her first victim, nor, he suspected, had he been intended as her last. The knowledge was a bitter pill, but it also strengthened his resolve. This wasn't just about personal betrayal anymore. This was about stopping a dangerous, amoral operative before she could destroy anyone else. During this period of intense internal turmoil and external deception, Julian found himself increasingly drawn to the quiet, unassuming presence of Lily Carter. He would seek her out, ostensibly to thank her again for her interesting drawing, but in reality, to simply be in the presence of her untainted innocence, her unwavering honesty. He would find her sketching in the atrium, her small face a study in concentration, and he would sit with her for a few moments, asking her about her drawings, about her day, listening to her soft, hesitant replies. He saw the world through her eyes, a world of simple truths, of clear distinctions between right and wrong, a world so far removed from the murky, treacherous landscape he now inhabited. He arranged for a small, private art tutor to work with Lily, ostensibly as a gift for Maria's years of loyal service, but in reality as a tangible expression of his gratitude, a way to nurture the unique, observant talent that had, quite literally, saved him. Lily, unaware of the drama unfolding around her, simply blossomed under the attention, her drawings becoming more confident, more expressive, her quiet joy a small, bright beacon in Julian's darkening world. He also made a point of subtly testing Isabella with information he knew Lily had innocently observed. He'd mention, offhand, a misplaced document that Lily had seen him working on, or a strange noise Lily had heard near his office. He watched Isabella's reactions, the flicker of calculation in her eyes, the way she would try to subtly guide the conversation, to dismiss Lily's observations as childish fancy. Each instance was another piece of evidence, another thread in the damning tapestry he was weaving. The strain of maintaining the facade was immense. There were moments when he wanted to scream, to confront Isabella, to unleash the torrent of rage and betrayal that seethed within him. But he held back, his discipline, his focus, honed by years of high-stakes business negotiations, now turned to this far more personal, far more devastating battle. He knew that premature action could jeopardize everything. He had to be patient. He had to be clever. He had to be as cold, as calculating, as ruthless as she was. The loving fiancé was a ghost, a phantom limb. In his place stood a hunter, his senses sharpened, his resolve hardened, his eyes fixed on his prey. And the trap, baited with her own greed and arrogance, was slowly, inexorably beginning to close. The final act of this sordid drama was approaching, and Julian Vance, the man who had been so easily fooled, was now determined to be the one to deliver the devastating final curtain. The culmination of Julian's elaborate counter-deception was planned with the meticulous precision of a military campaign. He chose the occasion carefully. Their engagement party, a lavish affair Isabella had insisted upon, to be held in the grand ballroom of one of the city's most exclusive hotels. It was to be a glittering showcase of their love, their future, a public declaration of their impending union. It would also, Julian had decided, be the stage for Isabella's spectacular public downfall. In the weeks leading up to the party, Julian, guided by Thorne's investigation, had gathered an irrefutable mountain of evidence against Anya Petrova, aka Isabella Rossi. They had traced her network, identified her accomplices, uncovered a string of previous victims, and, most damningly, identified the powerful, shadowy corporation that was her ultimate employer, a direct competitor of Thorne Industries, a company known for its ruthless, unethical tactics. It became clear that Isabella's mission had been twofold: to bleed Julian dry, financially through the marriage, and to systematically steal his company's most valuable trade secrets, its research and development, its strategic plans. The camera in his office, the microphones in his penthouse, had been her primary tools for this corporate espionage. The thought of how close she had come to succeeding, how easily he had been duped, still sent a shiver of cold fury down his spine. But now, that fury was channeled, focused, a weapon he would wield with devastating effect. He arranged for a discreet security team, Thorne's men, to be present at the engagement party, disguised as hotel staff, their eyes and ears alert. He also had a high-definition video screen, ostensibly for a sentimental slideshow of his and Isabella's happiest moments, set up in a prominent position in the ballroom. The content of that slideshow, however, would be anything but sentimental. On the evening of the party, Julian played his role to perfection. He was the doting fiancé, his arm around Isabella's waist, his smile warm, his eyes, when they met hers, filled with a carefully feigned adoration. Isabella, resplendent in a gown of shimmering silver, was radiant, triumphant, the queen of the hour, basking in the admiration of the assembled guests, a glittering constellation of the city's elite. She had no idea that her carefully constructed world was about to come crashing down around her. Midway through the evening, after the champagne had flowed freely and the speeches had been made, Julian stepped up to the microphone, a hush falling over the ballroom. "My dearest friends, esteemed colleagues," he began, his voice smooth, confident. "Thank you all for being here tonight to celebrate this joyous occasion, the impending union of myself and my beautiful, beloved Isabella." He smiled at Isabella, a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, a smile that held a hint of something cold, something predatory, that only she, perhaps, might have noticed had she not been so blinded by her own arrogance and impending triumph. "Isabella," he continued, turning to her, taking her hand, "you have brought such light into my life, such clarity." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. "And tonight, my love, I have a special surprise for you. A little tribute to our time together, to the unique bond we share." He gestured towards the large video screen, a collection of our most memorable moments. Isabella's smile widened, a flicker of genuine, albeit misguided, pleasure in her eyes. She probably expected a romantic montage, a public declaration of his undying affection. What she got was something far different. The screen flickered to life, not with soft focus images of their courtship, but with crystal clear, time-stamped footage from the hidden camera in Julian's office. Footage of Isabella, alone, rifling through his desk, photographing confidential documents, speaking in hushed, conspiratorial tones on a burner phone, her words, thanks to the covertly planted microphones, now echoing through the stunned silence of the ballroom. "The Ethelred acquisition is a go. Yes, I have the encryption keys for the Project Chimera files. He suspects nothing. The fool is utterly besotted." The footage continued, a damning, undeniable chronicle of her treachery, her contempt, her cold, calculating greed. A collective gasp rippled through the ballroom. Faces turned from the screen to Isabella, their expressions a mixture of shock, disbelief, and dawning, horrified comprehension. Isabella's face, just moments before radiant with triumph, had transformed into a mask of frozen, ashen horror. Her eyes, wide and terrified, darted from the screen to Julian, then to the shocked faces of the guests, her carefully constructed composure shattering like brittle glass. She tried to speak, to protest, to deny, but no words would come. She was trapped, exposed, her monstrous deception laid bare for the entire world to see. Julian watched her, his expression unreadable, his heart a cold, hard stone in his chest. There was no triumph in this, no satisfaction, only a profound, weary sadness for the love he had thought was real, for the future he had envisioned, now reduced to this sordid, public spectacle. But it was necessary. It was justice. The screen went dark. The silence in the ballroom was absolute, suffocating. Then, Julian spoke again, his voice quiet, but carrying to every corner of the room, each word a shard of ice. "It seems, my dear Isabella," he said, his gaze locking onto her terrified, crumbling facade, "that our unique bond was rather more transactional than I had realized." He dropped her hand as if it were a venomous snake. "And as for our memorable moments, I believe this one will be rather difficult for any of us to forget." He turned to the assembled guests, his voice regaining its customary authority. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for this unexpected turn of events. It appears my engagement is off. Please enjoy the rest of the evening. The champagne, at least, is genuine." And with that, he turned his back on the shattered remnants of Anya Petrova, a.k.a. Isabella Rossi, leaving her to face the full, devastating consequences of her treachery, alone, in the spotlight of her own making. The little girl's whisper had become a roar that had not only saved Julian Vance, but had also brought a dangerous, manipulative predator to justice. The truth, however painful, however devastating, had finally, unequivocally, prevailed. The fallout from Isabella Rossi's, or rather Anya Petrova's, public unmasking was swift and spectacular. The ballroom, moments before a glittering stage for her anticipated triumph, became the scene of her humiliating downfall. As Julian Vance made his icily composed exit, a stunned, almost horrified silence descended, broken only by the frantic, hushed whispers of the assembled guests. Anya, her face a mask of disbelief and dawning terror, found herself suddenly, utterly alone, the object of 100 pairs of accusing, contemptuous eyes. Thorne's discreet security team moved in seamlessly, preventing her escape, their presence a quiet, steely reminder that the game was well and truly over. The local authorities, already alerted by Julian's legal team, arrived shortly thereafter, and Anya Petrova, stripped of her borrowed name, her borrowed diamonds, and her carefully constructed facade, was escorted from the opulent hotel in handcuffs, her reign of deception brought to an ignominious end. The story, of course, became the scandal of the season, splashed across headlines, whispered in boardrooms, dissected in society columns. Julian Vance, the brilliant, ruthless CEO, had been duped, played for a fool by a sophisticated grifter. Yet, as the full details of Anya's elaborate scheme, her corporate espionage, her network of accomplices began to emerge, the narrative slowly shifted. Julian was seen less as a victim of his own naivety, and more as a man who had, with quiet courage and cunning precision, turned the tables on a dangerous adversary. The investigation into Starkweather Aeronautics, now public knowledge, further burnished his reputation, casting him as a man of integrity, willing to confront corruption even within his own empire. The competitor corporation that had employed Anya Petrova suffered a devastating blow to its credibility, its stock plummeting, its executives facing a firestorm of legal and public scrutiny. Thorne Industries, under Julian's now ethically recalibrated leadership, emerged stronger, its commitment to integrity a newfound, invaluable asset. In the quiet aftermath of the storm, Julian retreated from the public eye, seeking solace not in the empty grandeur of his penthouse, but in the simple, unvarnished truths of his life. He spent more time with Maria, their bond deepened by shared adversity and mutual respect. And he spent more time with Lily. He would often find her in the atrium, her sketchbook filled with increasingly sophisticated drawings, her quiet presence a balm to his bruised soul. He never explicitly told her the full extent of her role in unraveling Anya's deception, but he didn't need to. Lily, with her uncanny intuition, her wise beyond her years understanding, seemed to know. She would simply look at him, her dark eyes filled with a quiet, knowing empathy, and offer him a small, shy smile, a silent acknowledgement of the truth they now shared. Julian ensured that Lily's artistic talent was nurtured, her education secured, her future bright with possibilities. He established a foundation in her name, the Lily Carter Initiative, dedicated to supporting and empowering children who, like Lily, possessed unique observational skills, intuitive insights, and the quiet courage to speak truth to power, however small their voice. It was his way of honoring her, of ensuring that other Lilies in the world would be heard, their gifts recognized and celebrated. He also made good on his promise to Serafina Thorne. He visited her at the Althea Observatory, now a thriving, albeit small, center for independent research, its dome gleaming under the night sky, its telescope once again pointed towards the stars. He shared his findings, his theories, his passion for the cosmos, and in doing so, he helped her to see again, to reconnect with a part of herself she had thought long lost. Their relationship, born of such cynical, transactional beginnings, evolved into a unique, profound friendship, a meeting of two sharp, analytical minds, now tempered with a shared understanding of the complexities of the human heart, the allure of power, and the redemptive power of truth. Julian Vance never remarried. The betrayal he had experienced had left deep scars, a lingering caution that made him wary of superficial charm, of carefully constructed facades. But he was not alone. He had Maria, his steadfast, loyal friend. He had Lily, his small, wise sentinel, whose innocent whisper had saved him from a devastating abyss. And he had the stars, his constant, silent companions, their distant, unwavering light, a reminder of the vastness of the universe, the resilience of the human spirit, and the enduring power of a single, quiet truth. He learned that true strength lay not in invulnerability, but in the courage to be vulnerable, to trust, to love, even after profound betrayal. He learned that true wealth was not measured in stock portfolios or penthouse views, but in the genuine connections we forge, in the integrity we maintain, in the quiet, unassuming acts of courage that can, in the most unexpected of ways, change the course of our lives. And he learned, most profoundly, to listen to the whispers, to the silences, to the small, often overlooked voices that speak the truths others are too blind, too deaf, or too afraid to acknowledge. For sometimes, as he knew better than anyone, the smallest voice can herald the greatest storm or illuminate the path to a salvation you never knew you needed. The camera in his office was long gone, its insidious red eye extinguished forever. But the clarity it had inadvertently brought remained, a permanent, guiding light in the once shadowed corners of Julian Vance's world. The years that followed were ones of quiet rebuilding and profound, internal growth for Julian Vance. The dramatic unmasking of Anya Petrova had been a crucible, burning away the dross of his former life, leaving behind a man tempered by betrayal, but also, paradoxically, more open, more attuned to the subtle currents of human nature. He continued to lead Thorne Industries, but his leadership style evolved. The ruthless efficiency remained, but it was now underpinned by a deeper ethical consciousness, a greater emphasis on transparency and integrity. He became known not just as a brilliant strategist, but as a man of his word, a leader who valued truth above profit, a reputation that, in the long run, proved to be an even more formidable asset in the cutthroat world of global finance. His relationship with Lily Carter and her mother, Maria, deepened into something akin to family. The penthouse, once a symbol of his isolated success, now echoed with Lily's occasional, joyous laughter, her small, bright presence a constant reminder of the innocence and clarity that had saved him. He took an active interest in her education, in her burgeoning artistic talent, ensuring she had every opportunity to explore her gifts, to reach her full potential. He never forgot the debt he owed her, a debt that transcended any material reward. It was Lily who had, with her simple, unwavering observation, pierced through the sophisticated veil of deception that had so completely ensnared him. She had been his truth-teller, his tiny, unwitting savior. The Lily Carter Initiative flourished, quietly funding programs that nurtured intuitive intelligence in children, that encouraged critical thinking, that provided platforms for young, often marginalized, voices to be heard. It was Julian's quiet, heartfelt tribute to the little girl who had seen what no one else could or would. He also maintained his unlikely friendship with Serafina Thorne. Their shared experience at the Althea Observatory, their mutual journey from cynicism to a more nuanced understanding of truth and integrity, had forged a bond that transcended their disparate worlds. They remained intellectual sparring partners, confidants, two solitary stars finding a strange, unexpected gravitational pull towards each other in the vastness of their respective orbits. Serafina, too, had been changed by their encounter. Her own corporation underwent a quiet, internal reformation, her leadership style evolving, her focus shifting from relentless acquisition to more sustainable, ethically grounded growth. She often credited an anonymous astronomer with teaching her to see the bigger picture, to look beyond the bottom line to the wider, more complex, and ultimately more rewarding constellations of human values. The Althea Observatory, under Liam Sterling's quiet, dedicated stewardship, for Julian had, of course, tracked down his principled waiter and ensured his astronomical research received the funding and recognition it deserved, became a beacon of independent scientific inquiry, a place where truth was pursued for its own sake, unencumbered by corporate agendas or political pressures. Julian often visited, finding a profound sense of peace and perspective under its ancient dome, the silence broken only by the hum of the telescope and Liam's quiet, passionate explanations of cosmic wonders. He learned to navigate the night sky, to identify constellations, to appreciate the breathtaking beauty and humbling immensity of the universe. He learned that his own problems, his own triumphs, were but infinitesimal specks in the grand, cosmic scheme of things, a realization that brought not despair, but a strange, liberating sense of freedom. He never forgot the sting of Anya Petrova's betrayal, the chilling efficiency of her deception. It served as a constant cautionary tale, a reminder of the deceptive nature of appearances, of the importance of looking beneath the surface, of trusting one's intuition, even when it whispered uncomfortable, inconvenient truths. But the memory no longer held the power to wound him. It had been transmuted through experience, through reflection, through the quiet wisdom imparted by a child, into a source of strength, of discernment, of a deeper, more compassionate understanding of the human condition, with all its capacity for both darkness and light. His penthouse office, once a symbol of his power and his vulnerability, was now simply a place where he worked, its windows reflecting a cityscape he no longer sought to conquer, but rather to contribute to in a more meaningful, more ethically grounded way. The bookshelf where the camera had been hidden now held, in a place of honor, a small, framed drawing by Lily Carter, a wobbly, childlike depiction of his office, with a single, crudely drawn box in the corner, its unblinking red, I now transformed, in Julian's mind, into a symbol not of betrayal, but of salvation. For in the end, it was not the sophisticated security systems, not the powerful legal teams, not the vast resources of his empire that had saved Julian Vance. It was the innocent, unwavering whisper of a 7-year-old girl, a whisper that had pierced through the darkest of deceptions and led him, finally, irrevocably, towards the light. It is a story that reminds us to listen, truly listen, to the voices around us, especially the small, quiet ones, for they often carry a wisdom, a clarity that can illuminate the most shadowed paths and guide us, if we are willing, towards our own most authentic truths. Never dismiss the power of innocent observation. Never underestimate the courage of a child's conviction. For sometimes, the most profound revelations, the most life-altering truths come not from the mouths of kings or captains of industry, but from a simple, unvarnished honesty of a child who sees the world with eyes unclouded by cynicism, unburdened by ambition, and therefore uniquely capable of perceiving the emperor's, or in this case, the fiancé's, utter, devastating lack of clothes.